Alright, welcome back to Qedit tutorial part 11. We've been busy making this quest, which is the tutorial quest, which is basically going to serve to help new players just understand how the game works better. So let's go load into it. So right here you can see Hunter's tutorial. And as you'll see, as soon as we load into this quest, Phoenix Mog is going to explain how the introduction was made.
And this introduction mostly is a carryover from the first 10 parts of the series. We did some adjustments to make this a lot more engaging. There is multiple camera angles to work with, similar to like Phantasmal World. There's also an option to get like a little tour around the laboratory, and this function has a very sophisticated camera. So we'll play it for you, but then I will explain it when we get to it. While you have these text boxes, there is a moving camera that's similar to a camera pan. However, this is based off of a frame count, so after a certain amount of time passes, the camera stops. And this way it allows the camera to be like an action camera instead of being static or just moving from a static point and just looking around. In this case, it's both the camera and the position it's looking at is moving. There is a procedure to it, but as you can tell from this text, that there is a lot of things to understand for a first-timer. And they do show you around. There's plenty of NPCs to talk to that offer some important information while we're on here. The big one is when we turn left and she tells you that this is the way to the tutorial. It is kind of the intended direction, but you can talk to the one across the hall. That would be to Gadabel and Seabed, and he will actually guide you back over to the correct one. And this is a piece set pass that's done, so while the camera is faded out, it just moves you over here. And while you're here, the NPC will tell you to please step in. We'll come back to Pioneer 2 stuff later, but the only area for this tutorial is going to be VR Temple Alpha. It's a pretty open-ended area, and there's plenty of room variety for different features that we'll go over. The first thing that we have here is a VR link. If you have played through the story, you know that Ellie person is generally the person who talks to you through this. It offers you different locations to go to. For the purpose of the tutorial, it is kind of a on-rails education, so we'll guide you step by step through some areas that we think is a proper form of progression and understanding the game. If you talk to it now, the only thing that you'll have will be combat. That's kind of the go-to thing for PSO. So in combat, there is kind of a lot of information early on, but it is very important for playing the game. Many of these doors won't unlock until you actually talk to the consoles. So there's a couple options in here, and Kayak and I did kind of split combat half and half. I did most of the text that's on the VR link, where he did most of the room function. As you can see here, there's just a couple choices in here. If we specifically go into like weapon choices, we'll see that there's a second list that you can work with, and picking one of these options actually sends you to another list. You could then like cancel out and it would send you back to the original list. There was a lot of experimenting to make sure that the lists work just like Sega did in this sense. So like if we were to look at the script, where we are right now is in function 802. As we can see here, it does a switch call, which leads us into 3 other functions. The weapon list is function 804 here. In this one, we see that it leads us to a list that does a switch jump, and this specifically allows us to use this list indefinitely until we hit a ret in the function. And the reason why is because 802 is a switch call. The switch call allows this function to say, do whatever we need to do until we hit the ret. This way, when you actually do come back into this list, you can finally cancel out. The switch call leads it to function 836. 836 is just a letty R102 equal to 5, and that's what makes you pop to function 809, which is the cancel for this list. Hitting cancel in this first list will progress the quest, so you can read to your heart's content before continuing on. When you do hit cancel is when it'll clear the register and inform you about the heal ring, which is something that's not really gone over in most of Sega's literature. It is accompanied with a camera pan, so after you progress the window message, you'll see that it pans over to the heal ring, which is behind you at the start of this room, and then unlock the door. And throughout this quest, we also allowed the players to type in a keyword in this. Kayak will talk about keyword and continue on with the rest of combat.
Alright, so I believe we went over keyword in part 10, but with how I did it in part 10, it actually wouldn't work. So just to go over how keyword actually works, you need keyword detect in function 0. You also will need it on your floor handler as well. All right, the floor handler for our temple in this quest is 5, function 5. And then what will happen is, so function 52 is threaded. So if we go back to function 5, we'd see thread stage 52 here. So the way in your threaded function, you want keyword and then whatever your keyword is. R250 is just the register used to detect the player slot, which is also in function 0. And the way the register works for keyword is it's either set to 0 or 1. So it's a Boolean, so to speak. So basically if the player doesn't type it, it'll always equal 52, so it'll jump to itself over and over and over. But if the player does type it, we go to function 53 because register 101 will equal 1 in this case. So what I have is, this is call 173 and 172 is just different sync timings. So commonly in Sega quests, they often use the 170s for sync timers. So call 173 is 10 syncs, which is 1/3 of a second. Call 172 just calls 173 3 times, so it's 1 second essentially. So what this is doing is it freezes the enemies for about 5 seconds. This freeze enemy's opcode it has no register, it just does what it says it does. And then it plays some sound effects just to kind of know the player, let the player know that the enemies are being frozen and then unfrozen. Then we're clearing register 101, so we clear this out, and it jumps back to this function and it endlessly jumps again. So I will show this off. We also, in this room, we put some target practice for the player. So these are just basically targetable objects, and you can hit these about 65,000 times. We just put them here just so the player has something to kind of practice combos with, or they can do it from afar as well. That's all they serve. They're just here. Now, this Soda Minion is an NPC. He is going to basically spawn a wave of monsters for us. And just to show this off, you can't attack them while they're frozen, but they will not move nor attack you. So there you go. That's basically how that works. And it is not case sensitive either. So you can type freeze. You can also like type it really weird if you wanted. So just to show that it works. Now you do need to kill these Dominions in order for this laser fence to reopen. And it also lets you progress to the next area as well. So the way this sets new monsters. Okay, so 809, which is the cancel switch from the previous room. What it's doing here is it sets a register to, okay, so if you look at the view map events, wave 21 is all the stuff in this room. 21, I made about 18 waves in this room, so it's 21 to 39 or 38. So the way this works is if I were to go to function, here we go, 860. So it sets a wave of monsters, yes, no. Go to yes, you hit 861, which basically just is a fade out, a piece set pause to move you away from the NPC. It relocks the laser fences. And this what this does is set EVT. You can tie the set EVT to a register. So it sets wave 21 at the start, and then it'll add 1 to R201. And once you kill all the waves in this, he'll have a different line of dialogue. And that's shown up here, 862. Once register 8201 equals 39, you've killed all the monsters. And that is basically it for the combat section. Next we have the mag section. Phoenix Mog did this entire room. I had nothing to do with it, so he will explain how this room works.
And mags play a pretty big part of the game, especially for new players, where it kind of kickstarts your stats. There's a lot of descriptions in here, and it's of course non-exhaustive. There's plenty of outside resources such as PSO World, calculators, and other programs to help you kind of feed mags. The first one's just an introduction. It kind of tells you about the stats, what they do, feeding times and such. The big thing to know though is that throughout the quest we have set up chat boxes that is concurrent with the window messages. So in this case, this chat box stays in place while the window message scrolls. So you have a reference to understand as you talk about it. These were structured in a way where it is a thread stage that is called mid window, and it actually is just syncing endlessly until it hits a certain point in the window message that sets the register, which on the next A button press hits the win end for it. As you can see, after you hit a certain point, it just deletes the chat box, so it's just a window. This way you have helpful information to help you know what we're talking about here. For mags, these are useful for like setting up the evolutions or for the stats so that you kind of see them in place. And I also liberally used a lot of color text in here to show off, because mags are very functional for that. Like if we go into evolution, for example, we also have a small description about how mags evolve and what their requirements are. And for the following chat box, I had to come up with something a little more involving, because the text didn't format in a way that I really accepted. So if Kayak scrolls through a couple more window messages, we'll see two chat boxes that pull up the Type A and Type B IDs. Just as before, this is threaded the exact same way. It's just two thread stages with two different registers. The second one that we used here was register 199. This mostly was just so the text looks a lot nicer. Text formatting with Windows can be a little difficult if you want it to look nice. So I just opted for a way that is both different and clean. And the end result still makes it look very nice. And then to go along with what I had said earlier, the mag sections have a lot of colors. We'll see like the episode 1 and 2 mag evolutions, which use all the different combinations of section IDs and the stats. Therefore, the actual chat box for this is structured in a way where the spaces are put inside the string, separated by the new lines, which is the less than, CR, greater than, and then the colors are signified by the associated numbers, and then reverting it after the color is no longer needed. So as you can see for just the first line, def plus mine equals dex plus pow is basically about 3 times longer because the color text takes up a lot of space in the string and it's not seen. So while typing it makes it look messy, the actual final product in the chat box is very nice and clean. And the colors will be different depending on what kind of a monitor that you're playing on. But for example, yellow is quite hard to see, especially in the window because it's white. But the colors bring out a lot of life. In the next room was basically like an arena type where I have a VR link off to the side, and it mentions talking about photon blasts and donating. There's a lot of explanations that can be helpful for new players who don't know about these things. Photon Gauge specifically has information for donating and the awareness of it. In this entire mag section room as well, there is a quest board item that I gave the player that essentially deals a bunch of damage to you and gives you 100 PB. This way, you can just activate the quest board item and just experiment with Photon Blast. The switch in the middle of the room spawns a bunch of Sodominions that are littered all over the place. Some of them are in a more comical place, as you may notice. But they're placed in a way where you could experiment with Photon Blasts to kind of see their effective ranges and effects. And for those who are asking, yes, Pillet does hit those Sodominions up there. It'll be hard to see, but they do hit. And then you can leave the mag room by going through this warp that leads back to the VR link. The next section was also done by me. It's the challenge mode section, which kind of gives you a little like mock stage. You get a VR link here to kind of explain the basics of it, and then you get a warp that basically puts you into a little obstacle course. There's a couple traps along the way, and there's also just a intended route. As you'll see here, there is a Guam trap, or the ceiling traps from Ruins and Temple, that falls down on you if you try to hit this switch. And this switch specifically is also unique in that it uses a countdown object, which counts the number of frames that pass. The blue fence that it's tied to is inside that door Kayak is facing. If we check the countdown object, I made it 515 frames. So this is about 17 seconds. It's more than enough to get past the laser fence. The main thing about countdown object is that once the frame count is over, it actually relocks the switch ID that it's tied to. So if you don't make it past the laser fence, you just got to go back around and hit it again.
Another quirk about countdown objects that we discovered recently is in order for the sound effect to play, you need the rotation Y offset by 1 depending what the south direction is. So in this case, this map, the south direction is 0. So you need this rotation Y to be equal to south direction plus 1, essentially, for it to play the sound. Very quirky, but that's how it works.
Because Sega.
I will take the intended route. There is another way you can go. It involves glitching through a rock, which I will show. In the next section, there's another area you can do it in.
In this hallway, we also provided a smasher. If you stand inside the smasher, you'll notice that Kayak takes no damage. You might think, oh, you just set it to 0. But actually, we also have another function that's being ran in this quest for new players, which just completely recovers all damage done to them. This quest is not really designed for hunting and is not really a fast-paced quest. It's more educational, and so we figured it would be nice to just recover their health. As we see here, there is a VR link that's turned off, but it's conveniently placed next to a switch that turns it on. And now you might notice later that there is a force switch door that this switch is tied to. But we also have a rock here, where if you kind of position yourself in a way, you can actually move through it. It's the quickest path to the door. The way to this door normally requires backtracking through this maze room. The second switch for this door is on that switch that he passed by here. It's a proximity based to be able to target it, but hitting this target about 3 times will open the lock for it. So to progress in this section, you need to hit the switch and you need to hit the button, and it unlocks the force switch door. An optional room that we have here is this hallway. If you talk to this VR link, it mentions how episode 1 has random enemy spawns. We also included to spawn a random enemy. I included about 6 different enemies that can possibly spawn from this, and only one will spawn at a time. Let's see what he gets. So we got the Belra. That's one of the 6 that I provided for this. You can talk to the VR link again, but it doesn't actually set it because we had a jump eye that prevents you from progressing to that part of the function. So it just cancels out faster. And to finish off the challenge mode section, there's just a wall here that I put that requires 6 hits. 6 is the normal amount of hits to destroy objects in challenge mode. And if you round the corner, you'll hit this last VR link that talks about the requirements to get S rank of finishing in a timely manner. While I didn't include a timer for this little section, I did want to at least mention that being able to do this in a reasonable amount of time is kind of your goal in challenge mode. You want to be able to get your S ranks for your ES weapons. Many quests can have similar mechanics to challenge mode stages where they might have multiple switches or booby traps. But one of the best experiences in PSO is challenge mode, and we all highly urge new players to try it out, not just for the rewards, but for the experience itself. Now, if we go in this warp and go back to the main hub room, Kayak will actually be talking about the next area. He worked on this one.
Alright, so next we have the teamwork section. This is a pretty text-heavy section, and it's pretty simple. It's just a bunch of laser fences with some VR links. And, you know, once you go play through this quest, you can read through these. I'm going to go through these a bit quick. And here we use the chat box example again. We use this a lot throughout this quest. We just talk about damage cancel here. And this is the one that is quite large. So let's go to function 304, this thing. So what this VR link does is it will detect the player's class the first time they talk to it. So if you look at function 304, I set register 6 the first time they talk to it. So because I'm a QCast, I'm getting the QCast dialog. Here we go, 318. And what this does, it basically jumps to 330 if register 6 equals 0. So this calls this talk to this other class roles at the end of this. Each class section's about 6 or 7 message boxes, and every class does have its own chat box with its stats and what boosts or reductions it gets. So now if we talk to this again, we get a whole list of all the classes. So I'm not going to go through all these because they're all kind of similar in the regard of what they explain. But once you talk to one, the door unlocks. So the way this opcode works is it looks for first R230, which if we go to function 0 is character class. So this actually produces two results. R230 is going to be the class, the character's gender. I'm sorry, the character's race. So you get R230 if it's 0, if you're a human, 1 is a Newman, and 2 is a caste. The second one, the second register this produces is actually hidden. It produces the register next up. So it would be register 231, and that 0 would be hunter, 1 would be ranger, and 2 would be force. So that's half of how we get the class list here. The other one is the gender. So gender, it basically just gives you 0 is male and 1's female. And that's basically how you would get the entire class list. So you can see here, you have get character class. So this is Hunter Newman Force, or sorry, Hunter Newman Android. And it basically jumps to an entire function tree to get you to the right place. So that's how this one works. And this last one is just about drop etiquette. You can read this in your own time, and that's pretty much it with this room. So we're actually going to cut this episode right here. If you want to continue watching, you can find the link in the video description. It'll lead to what would be part 12. So thanks for watching part 11, and we'll see you over at part 12.